Okay.
She's all set, Becky.
Okay, great. Good evening. Welcome to our elected officials meeting. It is May 24th, 2021. We are live streaming this meeting so that everyone who is interested can come and participate. We will begin with introductions of the board. We are a board. We are the MSAD11 board. We each represent, or we live in, we are elected from the 4 towns of the district. However, we do not represent those towns. We represent MSAD11. That's an important distinction to make. My name is Becky Fless, and I am the board chair, and I live in Gardner. I will ask Veronica to introduce herself.
I'm Veronica Babcock. I'm the vice chair, and I live in Gardner.
Tony Veet.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Veet. I represent Gardner on the school board.
Teresa Garrett texted me that she will be joining us a little later tonight, and she lives and is elected from Pittston. Nancy Fortier-Brown.
Nancy Fortier-Brown, and I live in Randolph.
Thank you. Patrick Saucier.
I don't see him on, Becky.
Okay. Matthew Lillibridge.
I don't see him either.
Jim Lothridge.
I'm Jim Lothridge, and I live in Pittston.
Matthew Marshall.
My name is Matthew Marshall. Good evening. I live in Gardner.
Thank you. Alyssa Tracy.
Hello, I'm Alyssa Tracy. I live in Randolph.
Nicole Medore.
What's going on in Chelsea?
Good evening. I'm Nicole Medore, and I live in West Gardner.
Are our student representatives here?
They are not here, but Cullen McGuff.
Oh, jeepers. Okay. Sorry, Cullen. Cullen McGuff.
That's okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Cullen McGuff, and I live in Gardner.
I'm so sorry, Cullen. All right. And then our administrative team, we have Pat Hopkins.
Hi, Pat Hopkins, superintendent.
Andrea Dish.
Hi, I'm Andrea Dish, the district's business manager.
Angela Hardy.
Hi, I'm Angela Hardy, director of curriculum.
Chad Kempton.
Hi, Chad Kempton, Gardner High School principal.
Christina O'Neill.
Hi, Christina O'Neill, principal of Pittston Randolph Consolidated School.
Excellent. Alicia Morris.
Hello, Alicia Morris, Director of Special Services.
John LaPerriere.
John LaPerriere, principal of Gardner Regional Middle School.
Is Josh Farr with us tonight?
Yes, I am. Josh Farr. I'm the Director of Adult Education.
Thank you, Josh. Katie Gould.
Hi, Katie Gould, principal at Helen Thompson School.
Karen Moody.
Hi, I'm Karen Moody. I'm the principal of Laura Richards School.
Excellent. And let's see, Terry McGuire.
Hi, my name is Terry McGuire, Director of Technology.
The magic behind the computer. Thank you, Terry. And Vicki Duguay.
Hi, Vicki Duguay, principal at Riverview Community School.
And then we have the privilege.
Before you get to the elected officials, Gabe Dostie just joined us.
Oh, great. Gabe.
Hi, sorry, I was a little late. Gabe Dostie, Director of Operations.
Thank you. You come up as Amber, so I wouldn't have even have thought I wouldn't have thought you were Gabe.
Sorry about that. Logged in on Amber's computer again, late. Sorry.
That's okay, no worries. Ann Davis.
Hi, I'm Ann Davis. I am the current acting city manager for Gardner.
Greg Kuchar.
Hi, Greg Kuchar, Chairman of Board, Town of West Gardner.
Thank you. Denise Brown.
That wasn't Denise Brown coming in. I suspect she has technical difficulties, as we were talking about previously, but Denise is our finance director at the City of Gardner.
Thank you. All right, Marianne White.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marianne White, and I live in Gardner and serve at large on Gardner City Council. And I happen to be a teacher, which is why I happen to be Google Meet savvy.
You're a lucky, lucky lady. Pat Hart.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pat Hart, and I have the honor of serving as mayor. Thanks for hosting us this evening.
Rodney Hembry.
Rodney Hembry from the town of Pittston Select Board.
Thank you. And have I missed anyone else?
I don't think so, Becky.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. This has become sort of a tradition. This is maybe the first time that we've done it in this particular format. We usually meet in one of our schools and sort of sit in a circle together and take notes and have a robust conversation. Hoping that we can do the same thing tonight. It would be really great if you have questions or questions about anything, how we do things, how the budget works. If you would ask, I'm sorry, another board member just jumped on. Matthew Lillibridge just joined us, and he's a West Gardner representative. If you have questions, please bring them up tonight. Ask the questions. There are no bad questions. They're all great questions. And the more that we know together as a community, the better we can represent our schools within the community. So please ask the questions here, not elsewhere. It's better to ask within this setting because we can answer that. We have all the experts here who have put this together. This is the board's budget that we have put together with the help of our experts. Andrea Dish, Angela Hardy, and our superintendent, Pat Hopkins, have worked very hard with their administrative staff to bring this budget forward. So at this time, I will hand it to Pat so that she can begin leading us through.
Great. Thank you, Becky. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Yes, we have a slide presentation that we would like to share with you. I will present a portion of it. Angela Hardy will present a portion, and Andrea Dish will also present. As Becky said, if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Find that little raise your hand button if you're on Google Meets, or just chime in and ask us a question. There's also a section off to the side where you can make comments, and I will keep that visible. So if you want to write in a comment, you can do that and we will try to respond. So Terry McGuire is going to be running the slideshow. So Terry, take it away. So first of all, we did just try to highlight all of the members of the school board so that everyone would see who they are. And then Terry, the next slide. We wanted to start off with some great news, right? So one of the first good pieces of news is we're celebrating Barbara Asbury. Barbara Asbury is retiring from MSAD11. She has been a West Gardner school bus driver for 50 years. I just can't even begin to imagine all the things that she has seen and all the things that she has done. And we are just most grateful for the years that she has dedicated to the students in MSAD 11. And it is my understanding that there are some families where she has driven the grandparents, the parents, and now the child. So 3 generations of students. It's really very impressive. Another person that we want to recognize is Rayanne DeSoto. Many of you probably know Rayanne. Rayanne was just elected or chosen as the Kennebec County Teacher of the Year. We're really proud of Rayanne. She is a high school gifted and talented teacher. She also runs the middle school drama program. Thanks to Rayanne's commitment to the community, she is the one who got our food pantry at the high school off the floor and up and running. And she is also the teacher advisor for our Interact Club, which is a service organization connected to Rotary. So RAND is a lot not only for the school, but for the entire community. So with that, we would like to highlight some of our successes this year, and I am going to turn it over to Angela Hardy, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, who will lead us through the next 3 slides.
Good evening. So there's so many things that we could highlight across the year, including a focus on our staff's flexibility, the support from our community, and our students' persistence through ever-changing times. But we wanted to take a moment just to make sure everyone is aware that we have a first place winner in the state of Maine's Classical Association of New England's annual writing contest. Quentin Martin from our high school did very well in that competition, and we're very proud of him. And we've also spent a great deal of time this year working to build community and further enhance community when we are feeling isolated. And so our Gardner area high school students were looking for opportunities for service learning, and they partnered with a whole host of faculty members and staff members at the high school and worked with the Laura E. Richards School, so Karen Moody, and students identified there who might benefit from developing a stronger relationship with an older youth. And they met weekly in virtual environments. Adults shadowed those experiences, and they built connections around active engagement and learning without ever stepping foot in each other's schools. But it was a really brilliant idea that came up through the high school and really connected our Cubs with our Tigers. So that was fun. Additionally, with the changing schedule and the opportunity on Wednesdays for student support services and enrichment, our support staff librarian, Tabitha Stevenson from the middle school, launched a whole series of virtual book clubs. Our brand new art teacher, Carol Carlson, conducted 6 different remote art clubs on a weekly basis. And another group of faculty and staff at the high school worked with students and with changing participation weekly to foster their creative spirit through engagement of art, science, service, and literature. It was just a really wonderful, vibrant community that was born out of the challenges of the year. And then just a few images to connect you to the world that we live in now, with students still able to engage actively in works of discovery, creativity, problem solving, reflection, writing, and activity, all through the use of technology, spacing, outdoor learning, and a few extra layers at different times. We just thought you might like to see what happens on a daily basis. And then just a few other successes. The Maine Department of Education launched an online program called Moose to enable those who are working in remote spaces, working through homeschooling, or a combination of that, to have access to really rigorous interdisciplinary learning experiences, and 3 of our MSAD11 educators went above and beyond to help develop those over the course of the year, certain modules. We did launch for the first time ever our Remote Learning Academy this fall that went K through 8 with synchronous happening at the high school. And then we streamed it down to K through 5 to allow our middle school students to further develop connections and interactions with students and faculty within their learning environment, so it would make for an easier transition. Our K-5 community has been very active and vibrant, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the families. Across the K-12 space, we've had upwards of almost 400 students in this learning space this year, and that was something that is very new to our system, and we changed it over time as we gained feedback from our participants. And then we also increased our professional learning time with our staff across the district. At this point in time, we're upwards over 3,000 hours of professional learning time that had a direct impact influence on their daily instructional practices this year. Already, without the year even ending, we are at 1,250 more hours than we've had in the past. So those are just a few glimpses of the work that's been going on behind the scenes to make sure that our learners feel connected and engaged in their learning and are continuing to make progress as we go through this year.
Thank you, Angela. So next, we just wanted to show you how our dollars are spent throughout the district and where our budget goes. So looking at the top of the pie chart, I think some of the titles here need a little explanation. So system administration, that is the school board, which includes the liability insurance, items like that. It's the business office and it is the superintendent's office. School administration would be our 6 buildings. We have 4 elementary schools and a middle school and a high school. Our facilities maintenance, our bus transportation, food service, and other. I can't tell you, Andrea, what is that 0.1%?
It's the difference in the all other and the food service. So there's the state actually has a category called all other, and it's community service funds. So
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then we have, of course, regular instruction. We have special education. Other instructional programs would be athletics and student and staff support. That includes guidance, health services like our nurses, curriculum, library, professional development, instructional technology, and student assessment. Now, through all of this, if you add up the regular instruction, special ed, other instructional programs, and student and staff supports, then just under 72% of our total budget is dedicated and directed at student instruction. Also, if you look at this and if we were to break it down further, 79.5% of our total budget is dedicated to fixed salaries and benefits. And as you know, many of our staff are residents of MSAD11. So of that 80%, it really means that most of those dollars do go back into our local economy. Looking at some of these numbers in the pie chart, special education, for example, at 16.16%. If we were to remove the salaries and the benefits from that percentage, that would leave us with just 2.79% that we spend in special education. So the majority is spent on people. And those of you who are familiar with special education and with the law, the number of people that we employ are also driven by federal and state regulations, and how many students a teacher can have on their caseload and how many points of contact. I have similar information for like facilities, for example, that's at 11.46%. But if we pulled out the salaries and the benefits, then we would be looking at 7.3% for the actual cost to maintain our facilities. And for transportation, if we were to remove salaries, we're down to 4% for the actual operations of our buses. So going to our next slide, Terry. Cost per pupil. This is information that we have historically tried to share with members of the public. MSAD11 has oh, I'm sorry, Matt, I see that you have your hand raised. So before I'm going to go on, why don't you ask your question?
Yeah, I kind of want to go back to the pie chart, Pat. A couple of things. There was a thing there about meals. just not to be specific, but ballpark, how many meals over the last, say, the last 2 school years has the district provided to all the communities? Do you have a ballpark?
I do not. Andrea, you kind of manage and oversee. Do you have that number?
It is not, because of the summer feeding program that we're currently in, which is different than the regular school lunch feeding. It is not reported by number of meals served. Rather, it's expenditure driven. So to respond to
a lot.
A lot.
A lot. Okay. Great.
So,
thank you. I just wanted to point that out. That's kind of.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. You know, last spring, we provided meals to students and families who were at home, and we provided meals to whoever asked for them. So I know that we were providing meals to children who were not necessarily of school age yet. So if we were delivering to children who were say 5 and 6 years old, and there was a younger sibling who was maybe 3, the sibling still received a lunch or breakfast if the family requested it. So we were delivering a significant amount of meals to anyone any MSAD11 family with student age, the students in it that were of school age. And then this year, not only are we providing food service for students in person, we're also delivering to the homes of remote families. So if a family selected to be have their child receive their education remotely, we were still making sure that they had 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches all week. It's quite an undertaking for our school nutrition program.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Matt. All right, so cost per pupil. Historically, we have tried to provide this information because we feel it gives us a better chance of comparing schools to schools. So Terry, if you could take it to the next slide. You will see some of this data. MSAD11 has ranked in the bottom 10 to 15% in the state in the amount of money it spends per pupil. So I think this information really truly demonstrates just how lean we are in our district in trying to provide the absolute essential education, but we try to do it with as little impact on taxpayers as possible. Now, the data that I'm showing you is a bit old. It's 2 years old. The Department of Education is no longer making this information available. But we thought it was relevant to still share it with you. We believe that the fact that we are operating significantly below the state average remains true today. Now, you will see that I did not include Augusta. I'm certain that that's a question. Why is Augusta not on here? Augusta is about par with us. There are some years where Augusta will spend a little bit more per pupil, and there are years where they may spend just slightly less than our district. One of the biggest differences that we have found between Augusta and our district is that they've had an opportunity to really consolidate their buildings. So for those of you who are familiar with like the new Coney, they have their middle school, their high school, their tech center, and their superintendent's office all on the same piece of property in the same building. So they've been able to reduce their operational costs for their facilities. And that is not something that we're able to do here. You know, our communities years ago made the decision to have neighborhood schools. And as a result, we're not able to consolidate, and there is additional cost to operate community schools in terms of maintenance, but also staffing levels. The next slide shows student enrollment. Just wanted to give you a sense of where we are this year with our student enrollment. You can see September of 2020, we had, oh, I have these dates wrong. I apologize. September 2019, our enrollment would have been 2002, And September 2020, a year later, our enrollment was at the 1925. That is 73 students lower or fewer than the previous year. Many of those families elected to homeschool their children. Across the state of Maine, all school districts saw a considerable jump in the number of homeschooled students. We hope that they will return to school this next year, but for personal reasons, they decided to homeschool. Of the students that we had, initially we had 284 families that enrolled their children as part of our virtual or our remote academy. So they received all of their learning remotely. And if you jump forward to March of 2020, we were at 1980. This past April, you'll see that we were this still shows 1925. We were down only 55 students compared to this time last year, but you will see that our virtual learners, we actually increased. We went up to 393. And as Angela mentioned, at one time this year, we had 400 students plus that were in the remote academy. Now, even though we are seeing this drop in enrollment, you'll see down below, I noted that the majority of the decline has been in the elementary and the middle school. And at Gardner Area High School, actually our population is now higher than it's been in quite some time. And the enrollment is up by 28 students. Cullen?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I think you just answered it, actually. I just wanted to ask about the decline in pre-K entry and kindergarten entry. Because as a pre-K parent, I know that they've had incredibly small class sizes. And I've been thinking about developmentally what happens when those kids miss that first year. And I'm feeling a little anxious about being able to be there and get the kids up to speed in the coming year. So do you have a sense of how big that gap year is going to look?
I don't. I would actually look to Karen. Karen spends a lot of time focused on our pre-K and our kindergarten, and she has been heavily involved. And so, Karen, would you like to respond?
Sure. So at the very beginning of the year, we, as you said, we had a very low enrollment when we were doing cohort A, cohort B. And it was great in February when the kids were able to come back and there was 10 in the class. And because of the spacing, we couldn't go any higher. So this year we're looking to move the pre-K in my building to bigger classrooms. So we're hoping to be able to get those numbers back up again, even if so that will help. I will say, there are children who haven't been in our pre-K at all, and we've had those years before when that's happened, and we will just jump right in kindergarten and find out where those kids are starting, and we're going to put a lot of emphasis on literacy and math this next year. The whole district is looking to put in intervention time blocks in our schedules, and that will allow for a lot of kids to be grouped according to their academic needs, so we can really hyper focus on that. So I think we're going to be okay. This whole year is going to be coming up is going to be a real challenge to see where the kids are. But I will say, we just finished with Nuia's, and in a year of the pandemic, we've really focused on literacy and math, and the kids have been doing remarkably well. So I have a really positive sense that we're going to be okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry, the next slide. The next slide is just kind of a snapshot as we kind of talk about the fact that enrollment has declined over the years. I thought it would be helpful for us to go back and take a look at our historical employee count as well. I know that during the development of our budgets over the years, we always look at class sizes. We spend a lot of time making sure that we have enough personnel, but that we're not overstaffed. And so I was actually surprised when this information was shared with me. From 2010 to 2020, we're down about 74 employees. So over a 10-year span, we've decreased a number of positions. Now, these are more full-time positions. They are not the temporary employees such as coaches and substitutes. Matt?
Yeah, Pat, this slide is amazing, frankly. I mean, to think that most organizations in any realm, once you have 444 employees, typically you don't decrease. So, I just want to give a shout out to the folks that have, since 2010, realized how important the cost is and how important it is for, for our taxpayers. This is amazing. I'm 440 to 370 in 10 years, and frankly, you never see that happen. Once you get to a point where you have 444 employees, you hate to give them up, and it's amazing how folks, the staff, and prior boards have worked to be reasonable when it comes to budgeting for employees. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Matt.
Yes, thank you, Matt.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who is going to walk through our proposed budget and more specific details in the 2021-2022 proposed budget. So Andrea, take it away.
So the budget that we are proposing for 21-22 is $26,824,000, an increase of $663,000 or 2.78%. This slide is being provided so that community members have some basis for funding history. Over the past 10 years, our budget has increased on average 2.36%. The local allocation, which is the amount that the locals pay, has increased over that 10 years, an average of 2.81%. The local assessment history for Gardner over the 10 years, it's increased 1.81%, Randolph 1.98%, Pittston on average 3.42%, and West Gardner 4.35%. I know that on our district website, you will also find a 25-year history of our funding requests. So for those of you who might be interested, that's where you can find a lengthier history.
Andrea,
Sure,
Matt Lily Birch has a question.
Sure.
No, I didn't if I hit the raise hand button by accident.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
So changes to the proposed budget, as Pat said in a previous slide, that our staff is equal to approximately 80% of our budget. So the state is beginning to implement teacher salary requirements, the amount that we are required to pay staff. So for 21-22, it's 38.5, and we're talking about starting teachers. And in 22-23, the required starting pay for teachers will be $40,000. In addition, our staff, our hourly staff, has to keep in step with the state as far as the minimum wage. We're eventually going to be looking at a $16 an hour minimum wage for support staff for the 2022-23 year. Currently, some of our staff members, our starting staff members, make $12.50 an hour. So this year, the district also saw a 4% health insurance increase. The district, for every percentage of an increase, it increases the district's budget by approximately $32,000. And just so that you can put this in perspective, the increase that we got from the state as far as subsidy was $58,000 total for this year. So 4% increase was certainly more than we received in additional funding from the state. With the exception of a half-time assistant principal at Helen Thompson School, there is no new staff included in the general fund budget. That is not to say that we don't have new staff members, but they are going to be funded by additional COVID and ESSERF money that we will discuss later in the presentation. One of the district's other huge costs, other than salaries and benefits, is special ed out of district placements. We refer to them as SPPS, Special Purpose Private School. When the district is unable to provide or meet a student's educational needs, or a special ed student's educational needs, we are required to send that student out of district. Some of our single SPPS or out of district placements can cost $100,000 per student, excluding transportation. So in some years we've had the annual tuition cost for one student be $100,000, and we've paid $75,000 to transport that student to the school. So we are just talking about one student. So this year in our budget, there are additional special ed per special SPPS placements. In addition, for those students who are placed in those special purpose private schools, the district, per the state, is also required to pick up Medicare costs for those students. So if the student, actually Medicaid, or care. So if the student is eligible for main care or Medicaid, that school would bill the state for the percentage that the state is required to pick up for the Medicaid students. And essentially those costs would be backed billed to the district, and our subsidy would be reduced. So if we have students who are receiving Medicaid and attend those, that directly impacts the district's state funding. One of the other things that we've done this year is expand the autism program from a K2 program to K5 to hopefully reduce the out-of-district placements, because you can see how expensive they can be. And we've removed approximately $270,000 in this budget to those federal grants that I referred to for one-time costs, such as facilities maintenance issues and some curriculum expenditures that we needed to make. Is there anything else that you would like me to touch upon, Pat?
No, I don't. There's nothing else that comes to mind. But these were really, truly the bulk of the changes that occurred to our budget. We really did not make any change from the current year. We touched it as minimally as possible, especially understanding that the small amount that we received in revenue from the Department of Education, we understood that it could have a significant impact on taxpayers, and we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. Andrea, Matt Marshall has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Hey, I just wanted to give kudos to the staff and Pat, and Andrea. You have done a remarkable job with the minimum teacher salary issue, and we were talking about this last year during budget season. You know, to take a little bite this year, knowing that what we're going to face next year would be a potentially huge increase to the taxpayer and our budget. So I just want to say, you know, you guys have done a remarkable job at figuring this out and leaning forward and planning for this. So thank you.
Also, oops, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you, Matt, but you know, that just makes me think we really do need to be thinking about and planning for the potential of that $16 an hour minimum starting pay for support staff. Right now, that is at the legislative level. It has not officially been approved, but I heard it ought to pass. And the state would pay for the increase in 22-23. So employees would see the increase in 22-23, but the district wouldn't pick up the entire cost until 23-24. But we are talking about potentially a $4 an hour increase for some of our staff. And if that base increases at $4 an hour, it's going to filter throughout the entire salary scale. So we are talking about a significant increase in salaries should that happen at the legislative level.
And I'm also worried about the increase in health insurance after COVID. COVID has prevented a lot of people from accessing just their general health benefits. And as a result, we're seeing a single-digit increase in health insurance. Typically, or in the past few years, we've seen doubled, with the exception of this year and last year, we've seen double-digit increases to health insurance. So I'm wondering what things are going to return to once we return to an after COVID world, whether people or when people start moving around and going back to seeing their physician and things are once scheduled for as far as medical procedures. I just wanted to, one more thing I wanted to know while we're talking about, I mentioned that the district, or actually that the state, we received an extra $58,000 from the state. As far as our subsidy goes, the state contributes almost 55%, 54.18% of the district's budget. So when we don't receive a lot of additional subsidy, it has a huge impact. And what I want to say is that every year the state reshuffles the cards. You're not guaranteed to get more on top of what you received last year. They look at all the districts throughout the state and they reshuffle it according to the ED 279, which is the state funding formula. So while some years you may be a winner, there are other years you may end up actually losing funds. So I just want you to know how much we rely on our state subsidy.
Thank you, Andrea. Anne has her hand raised.
Thank you, and my apologies, I got bounced out, and this may have already been asked, so just tell me to go back to the tape if it has. I have two completely different questions. Can you speak a little bit about the halftime assistant principal at Helen Thompson?
Sure. Yeah, we've added that halftime position because Helen Thompson is the largest elementary school, and it is becoming virtually impossible for one person to manage on their own. And now that we're expanding the autism program K-5, we're going to have to move that autism program that is currently housed at LER over to Helen Thompson, because those students need to be with their peers, which means they have to be in a K-5, so that's either over at Pittston Randolph or over at Helen Thompson. And so through some federal monies, we're going to be able to purchase a 4-classroom modular unit that we're going to place at Helen Thompson to help reduce some class sizes. And that will give us a little more wiggle room, a little more space that we can put the autism program out there. But to add an additional program on top of the workload out there is just kind of is breaking the back here. Something has to be done. We're going to use some federal monies to cover the other half of the position so that we're not looking to employ just a part-time person. And the other half of the job will be around instructional support for our staff.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. And the other question is this. The city of Gardner, and I'm sure most municipalities, have what's called a fund balance, a rainy day fund. I'm not quite sure what the school district would call it. Are you tapping into that for this year to keep costs down? And if so, how much of your budget reflects that fund balance?
So unlike the the city's or the municipality's rainy day fund. The district has what we refer to as carry forward. It's the portion of our budget that is not spent from year to year. So we, by state statute, are not allowed to spend in any given year any more than the taxpayers have authorized us to. So if we have a huge expenditure, let's say, for example, our boiler breaks down at Helen Thompson School, we are not allowed to just go and automatically use those carry forward funds. By law, carry forward funds can only be used for actually two ways. The first being is to buy down the budget in a subsequent year. So if you look at the worksheet that we have on the district's worksite, on the website, you'll see that there's carry forward applied to this year's budget to buy down what is being passed along to the locals. That is our carry forward. The other acceptable use of carry forward is to create reserve accounts. So by ourselves, we are not able to create a reserve account. That reserve account creation needs to be created at the budget meeting level, and it's approved. The motion to approve the reserve fund, and there's only a few that the state allows. It allows fuel, it allows capital improvements, and it allows special ed. So the taxpayers at that meeting would need to approve the creation of the reserve account, as well as the money being swept in the reserve account, in addition to any amounts that we are proposing to use from those reserve accounts. So even though we have funds in those reserve accounts, I cannot, or we cannot, dip into them during a school budget year without getting voter approval to be able to use those funds. So we are very much restricted in how we are able to use carry forward funds. Does that help, Anne?
It does. Thank you, Andrea. But I'm just curious as to why you haven't asked the voters to let you use some of the reserve account money, especially this year. If I misunderstood you, please clarify for me.
So we haven't, I would only ask that if we had overspent our budget. I was talking in a previous slide. Currently, we have two reserve accounts. We have a capital improvement fund, and in that account sits $50,000. And then our other reserve account is a special ed reserve account. And I'm not sure if you missed the part of the discussion when I said that a special purpose private school placement for one of our students can exceed $175,000 in a single year. So we would not go to the, it would first begin with our board. I would not go to the board until we had completely expended our special ed budget. And it would be at that point that we knew that we were going to overexpend our special ed budget, that we would need to go to the taxpayers and ask for permission to use, and there would have to be a meeting to be able to use those reserve funds.
Thank you, Andrea. And I did miss it because for some reason I got bounced out. Do you know off the top of your head how much that is currently?
Currently, there's only 300,000, so that could be one or three students.
Yeah.
So not very many.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
that explanation.
You're welcome.
Andrea, I think Greg Kuchar has his hand raised.
Hello, Greg Kuchar.
Actually, this is more for Pat. Just wondering where the additional buildings or the classrooms are going to be placed at Helen Thompson next year.
Sure, I have Gabe here. Gabe has been working with Katie to identify the location. So Gabe, why don't you answer Greg's question, please?
Do you mind just restating it really quickly, Greg?
Yeah, I'm wondering in relationship to where the school is now at Helen Thompson, where are these 4 classrooms going to be located?
Sure. So just outside the doors, if you exit the building, facing the playground. The building would be positioned just to the left of those doors and at least 20 feet away from the building. Part of the tarred area where the basketball court would be covered up. It would still leave access from the rear of the building around the new 4-unit classroom. And we've worked into the proposal for the modular to add additional paving on the backside. So we're basically, the area that we're covering with the modular, we'd be adding pavement to the backside of it, further out towards the field area on the backside. And we would be repositioning some of the basketball hoops.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, sure.
Andrea, Matt Marshall has his hand raised.
Hey, just so I guess the rainy day fund is what the municipal side calls it. Ours is carry forward. So, you know, Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, and I think you've already stated this, that there's a lot of legal wrangling that goes on as to what we can spend our carry forward money on, to your point, I think, during your conversation. But on the municipal side, I think that whatever their balance is in their rainy day fund, they can pretty much vote to spend it on whatever they want. And they have. And so I just wanted to point that out, that we're very limited on what we can tag that money, you know, what we can spend that money on, and that's basically it.
So to further, to go further on your question, Matthew, or rather your statement, is the state only allows us to carry 3% of our current budget in carry forward. Now we're lucky. We have the caveat with the 3% is that we have to have a plan for it to spend it over 3 years. We always only use carry forward to further reduce the budget, but we are extremely limited as to how much we can have and what we're allowed to do with it. So, yeah.
Andrea, Pat Hart has a question.
Hi, Pat.
Pat, you are muted.
There, I found the unmute button. I learned 2 things tonight. So as you're talking about fund balance, it's reminding me that we're waiting eagerly to see what the legislature is going to do with restoring our municipal revenue sharing. And I know that they are also looking at restoring, or actually first-time funding, the education. Is it 55%? That's the number you all hope for. So if they do agree to fund you all at that number, can that money be spent? You've got all your materials out, warrants are printed, we're all ready, we've got absentee ballots out. Is there any way to actually use that money for this next year? Does it have the same rules as this carry forward that you're talking about?
It does. So when the voters vote on June 8th to spend the budget, that's the only amount that we would be able to use, unless we choose to go back to taxpayers to ask them to allow us to spend the difference. And I don't remember having that conversation during finance, but you're correct. We would not be allowed to use it. It would just flow into our carry forward.
However, Andrea, there at the Finance Committee, we did discuss, and we have a slide on this, Pat.
Okay.
We discussed the fact that if that funding is approved for MSAD11, that would total a little over $600,000. And so, as Andrea said, that there is some of that money we just can't touch it without voter approval. But what the Finance Committee discussed, and they plan to recommend to the school board, that is to apply $358,000 of it towards taxpayer relief to help reduce the impact on taxpayers from this budget. And the remaining amount, the $250,000, they're proposing be applied to a capital reserve account. Since Andrea already stated the capital reserve is at 50,000. So to add 250,000 to bring that up to 300,000. But again, that requires voter approval to be able to do that.
So just to further clarify what said, returning funds to the towns would not be considered an expenditure. We'd reduce the assessments that we sent to you. So it's technically not
Oh.
it's technically not an expenditure.
Yep.
It's just a reduction of the assessments that we will send. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. That's helpful. And fingers crossed for everybody, right? That we get what we were
Right.
promised.
Agreed.
Okay, so I would say, Andrea, are you ready for the next slide?
Sure. I don't... So I just wanted to explain to everybody why we keep parsing out our expenditures in this manner. There are actually 11 expenditure articles that the state requires that we package our expenditures in. It's the same 11 expenditure articles if we would have a district budget meeting that taxpayers or voters in the meeting would have to vote on. So our regular instruction increased by 331,000. The biggest increase in that obviously is health insurance and salaries. Special ed increased by 282,000. Again, salaries and benefits as well as additional out-of-student placements to special purpose private schools, and an increase in the amount that we're budgeting for Medicaid reimbursement. So I said earlier that when we had to, the state had to pay its portion, that it reduces our subsidy. So in order to account for that, we actually budget for some of those Medicaid expenditures, or that match in our budget. Other instruction, we talked about that being athletics, as well as we refer to it here as co-curricular and extracurriculars. So it's drama, it's all of our athletics. The reduction comes from we've budgeted this year for equipment and supplies for our new turf fields. So we were able to see a reduction in those. Student and staff support, all of those areas that Pat mentioned earlier, including curriculum, guidance, technology, and a lot of nursing, social work, a lot of other things that we do. A lot of that reduction is due to the fact that we are able to sweep some of those one-time expenditures into the federal COVID monies that you've heard us mention briefly. So we're lucky to be able to do that. System administration, a $25,000 increase. It's salaries, benefits, as well as another program that we are using to electronically do timesheets. In the land of COVID, we've moved away from paper, and what we are using now doesn't work. So we have purchased something to make it easier for our payroll person to process all of the salaries for the individual that we're talking about. School administration, part of that is that additional halftime principal at Helen Thompson. As you remember from the earlier conversation, only half of that is actually budgeted in the district. The other half is in the grants as well. Transportation, the biggest increase to transportation is the increase of our buses. The district does not own our buses. We actually lease them and pay a per mile rate. We have found that this works for us. We have some of the newest buses in the state. We often hear stories about districts who have very old buses who break down, and as a result of leasing our buses, we do not have to pay for tires. We do not have to hire a mechanic. We do not have to have a garage. So there are a whole lot of expenditures that we save by leasing our buses, and it works great for us. Facilities maintenance, a small increase. Other commitments is basically some community service items, and I think food service is missing out of there. That's approximately $200,000. Our food service budget is not self-supporting, which means that the program in itself does not generate enough revenue to pay the salaries and the benefits as well as the food of the food service program. So the district has in its budget an allocation to the food service program to make it whole. So at the end of the year, when it's in the negative, the district will transfer the amount to bring it to zero. And that is what's in our budget for food service. Questions? I know, lots of stuff. Anne has her hand up.
Thank you. Andrea, on some of these items that you're paying with one-time federal funding, seem to me as if they're going to continue over a number of years. How confident are you that the feds will continue to support that?
So we're not confident that the feds will support this after 2 years. We have 2 years to use these ESSER monies. Most of these expenditures are one-time expenditures, and the staff that we are hiring with those federal funds know that their position is only good while those federal funds exist. So they are all being made aware that these are limited positions. Pat, do you want to talk about the types of positions, or are we going to cover that later?
We're gonna cover that very shortly. So if we could just wait till we get there, that would be helpful, and I will go into it in greater detail.
Thank you.
Terry, I guess slide unless somebody has. So based on the current budget without the governor's proposed increase, this is the impact to taxpayers to the mill rate. So in Gardner, the increase is 0.62 per thousand per mill. In Pittston, it's 0.83 per thousand. In Randolph, it's 0.66 per thousand. And in West Gardner, it's 0.57 per thousand. If you have heard us discuss the ED 279, the impact to taxpayers, to the locals, is affected by the valuations, and they're ranked. So every year, as the valuations of our 4 municipalities change, so does the shift of where the funds change between our 4 communities. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm hoping it does. Questions? Slide, Terry, please. So the governor's proposal is to fund 55% of funding to schools, which, as Pat mentioned earlier, it's a potential increase if the legislature passes it of $608,000. At our most recent finance committee, the finance committee voted to return or to adjust the assessments of the locals by $358,000, and to ask at its spring meeting to sweep the remaining $250,000 into a capital reserve fund. As Pat said, it costs a lot of money or funds to maintain the district's 6 schools. So that is the intention. The potential impact to taxpayers once that $358,000 has been returned is it would be an approximate increase to the residents of Gardner of 0.24 per mill, Pittston 0.44 per mill, Randolph 0.31 per mill, and West Gardner 0.22 per mill. But as a reminder, it's still pending legislation.
And for clarity for anyone who's listening, that this is not per mill in addition to the previous slide. These would be the amount per mill in lieu of, right, the previous slide, or instead of the previous slide, should schools receive this 55% funding. So I just wanted to be clear for anyone who was listening.
Slide.
Okay, then it's back to me. So, so we have been very fortunate to have received a lot of federal money over the course of this past year. So in September through April, we received approximately $4.9 million. We were told that that money had to be used to address needs caused by COVID-19 for expenses that were not previously planned for and were not budgeted. So it had to be above and beyond. And our goal was to purchase, as Andrea already said, one-time items so as not to create a cliff in the budget that when the money went away, all of a sudden we're going to add all of this stuff back to the budget. So we were trying to be very mindful of that. So how we spent the money that we had received within that time frame. One, we upgraded our ventilation systems throughout our entire facility. We put something in called O2 Prime, and it was an air purification technology that cleaned the air inside of all of our buildings. And that was well over $750,000. We upgraded technology that was necessary for distance and remote learning. So we purchased new laptops. We had to put in new wiring throughout all of our buildings. We were finding that they were not robust enough to accommodate the number of students and staff that were on our system. We bought new projectors and whiteboards and document cameras and things like that. And that cost $1.1 million. Modular units, we are looking at a 4-classroom modular unit over at Helen Thompson, as I already mentioned, and at Pitts and Randolph School. We, a few years ago, purchased a modular unit with 4 classrooms, but they still need more space, especially given some of the class sizes and the fact that we want to reduce class sizes to ensure that we can have students back and still meet the social distancing or the physical distancing requirements. So we're looking at adding 2 additional classrooms to the existing modular over there. And I'm sure you all know that the cost for building materials has gone through the roof. So the amount that we paid for the 4 classrooms at Pittston Randolph 2 years ago is about the price that we're going to have to pay for 2 classrooms to be added. And the cost for Helen Thompson is double of what it was before. So that is around $1 million that we're spending there. We are looking at hiring and have hired additional staff to reduce class sizes, to teach some of our remote classes. We've hired an additional nurse. We've had COVID substitutes to help us manage the day-to-day challenges. So we've spent over $800,000 on that. We also tried to purchase items that we knew that the voters would need to pay for at some point. And we used the money to do that instead. So new cameras in all of our schools, which came in so handy for contact tracing. But that is something that we would have had to pick up as a district later on. Our phone system was so antiquated. And so now we have a new phone system that would allow staff who were quarantined to be able to work from home and to receive voicemail. So our entire phone system was upgraded. We are looking at new signs at the middle school and the high school so that it will improve our communication with our parents. We also looked at cleaning equipment, PPEs. We bought 2 new tractors so that we could clear off snow, so that students could go out and socially distance. We bought a new truck with a plow on it for the same reason. Some outdoor equipment, some bottle fill fountains, and then student desks, cafeteria tables, professional development, all of those types of things. So that's how we spent that money. And then, Terry, if you go to the next slide, we now have additional money coming. We have, it's called ESSER 3. We have not yet received the application for that money, so we have not applied. This is part of the American Rescue Plan, those relief funds. And as Andrea said, we can spend them over 2 years. 20% of that money absolutely has to be spent on evidence-based interventions for students. So what we're looking to do is we're going to hire 9 additional classroom teachers to help reduce class sizes. So Pittston, we're sending over a couple teachers there. Helen Thompson's going to have a teacher. I think we're having 3 at the middle school. I have 1 over at Riverview, 1 at the high school. We have 2 additional social workers. Another one will be in the elementary school, and the other one will be shared amongst our middle school and high school to support our students with some SEL concerns. We're hiring 3 additional instructional coaches, 2 in the elementary school and 1 in the middle school. As a part of all of this, we are purchasing new curriculum focused on literacy, and the instructional coaches are there to support our teachers, to help the teachers learn the new system and the new program, and to really help them find techniques, learn techniques that will better support individual students and provide them the interventions that they need for their academic growth. We are looking at heat pumps at Helen Thompson. We have in the budget right now, I think we've been budgeting for, I think 10, no, maybe that's too many. Gabe, how many heat pumps a year have we been budgeting for? 3 maybe?
Yes, that's correct. 3 heat
3.
pumps a year.
All of the heat pumps there have to be replaced. They're all wearing out. And so we've dedicated, or we're hoping to be able to dedicate a chunk of this money to just replace them all so that eventually we can take them out of the budget. And the next slide shows after school programs. We're looking at high school credit recovery, an extended school year program for our special needs students. We need to purchase technology equipment for the new modular units. We also have some older windows in some of our buildings. We're hoping to maybe increase to cover costs for some of that. Potentially outdoor classroom space and expansion of parking over at Pittston Randolph. If they're going to have more classrooms available, they're going to need some additional space. We're looking at Wi-Fi and internet down to Hoke Field, as more students are going to have to learn, take their PE classes outside. Then those teachers need to have internet access while they're down there. And there is talk about having a project manager to really help us oversee some of the facility projects and to assist with the invoicing requirements. And Andrea, very briefly, can you just touch upon the invoicing requirements and some of the demands and expectations as a result of us receiving these additional funds?
So while federal monies are great, they come with a lot of additional requirements and just additional paperwork that we have to do. And in the fall, it would take me at least a week to get an invoice together to be able to get our monies back. So unlike district monies or unlike local monies that we get on a 12-month basis, with federal monies, we need to make the expense and then we request for reimbursement. And there's a lot of requirements as far as what needs to be included. In addition, there's a lot of requirements as far as how the money can be spent. Gabe and I were talking today about the construction projects at Helen Thompson and Pittston Randolph and how they needed to comply with the Bacon-Davis Act, and how we need to make sure that they follow those federal guidelines for the services that we're having. In addition, there's a lot of, as far as bidding, and there's a whole practice as far as federal procurement. So it's very time consuming. It's taking our time from our regular work to just to be able to spend this federal money. So it comes with a caveat.
Thank you. Veronica?
Yeah, I just want to say that as an educator myself and talking to lots of different teacher fellow colleagues and community members from other communities, it really is amazing how much work that our district has done with being very thoughtful and explicit with how we spend our COVID money. There's other, like in my building, I really have no idea what the school board has voted to spend that money on. Other communities, it's wishy-washy. So it really, as a taxpayer in this city and as an educator and a board member, I'm really proud of the way that we're very transparent with how we've spent the money and that we're getting every bang for our buck.
Thank you, Veronica. And that is it. So Terry, the next slide. That's what I have.
Matthew has his hand up.
Matt
Marshall has his hand up.
I just wanted to take a second and talk about instructional coaches. You know, when I first started this, I'm in my last year. 2 years ago, when we started talking about instructional coaches, I was like, wait, why are we going to spend money on stuff like that? It really doesn't. I don't see the impact in the classroom. But as we start talking about spending a ton of money, and it is a ton, and this is actually where we should be spending money on curriculum for our students. Teachers need to be brought up to speed on new curriculum. They're getting in there, they're doing it every day, they're getting their hands dirty. And without time and support to understand and roll out curriculum, the new curriculum, without coaching help, it can be very overwhelming. And I think, you know, spending some money and supporting that effort is extremely important. And, you know, as the chairman of the curriculum committee this year, I really see the value in that. So supporting teachers, students, and getting support in the classroom. Not only, I mean, curriculum, you know, the coaches even help students sometimes. So I think it's something extremely important. That was part of the slide prior to the last one. So I just wanted to point that out. I raised my hand a little bit late, but.
Thank you, Matt. Ann
has her hand up. Ann Davis.
Ann, do you have a question?
My apologies, I was on mute. I just want to applaud the district for spending their COVID money wisely. That's really quite impressive. Again, my concern, and I brought it up previously, is you know, we're going to be able to offer some great programming, and yet in 2 years, that money will not be available. And so my concern is that, you know, we brought it to a caliber of a superior education choices, and then will we have to drop it back down? I know there's no easy answer for this, but you know, the federal money isn't going to be around after COVID, I'm afraid.
So, Ann, we tried very intentionally to Can you put yourself on mute just for a sec? Thank you, Anne. I could just hear that feedback. But we've tried very intentionally to select expenses that aren't going to create a problem in 2 years. The additional staffing that we've built in, that is to decrease class sizes so that we can bring students back. And we've hired everyone with the understanding that they are 1 year or 2 year positions and that they are disappearing, so that those people know that those positions will not last. The curriculum that we're purchasing, we're buying it entirely up front so that there will not be some additional expenses as the years progress. You know, the windows, some of the maintenance, all of those things we're trying to buy now so that we don't have to build them into the budget. And so they're really just one-time costs. So that is our intention, because we are very concerned that we don't want to create this cliff where in 2 years people believe that all of these expenses are now just going to be added to the budget. That is not the intention, and we have tried to be explicitly clear with everyone what our intentions are. I hope that helps, Anne.
Also, I will say, Pat and Anne, that this isn't the first time that the district has received federal monies that have disappeared. Years ago, when Obama was in office, we received ARA monies, American Response Recovery Act monies, and we did a great job budgeting that as well. So we didn't create that cliff that Anne was referring to, where all of a sudden everything needed to be shifted to the district budget. So we were very good about picking one-time expenses, and I think that we've done that again.
Thank you, Andrea. Denise has her hand up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Brown. I'm the Finance Director for the City of Gardner. Thank everybody who is attending tonight. I think this was a great presentation. Not to belabor the discussion about fund balance, but I see that you have 2.6 million in your unassigned fund balance. And despite the use of 1,325,000, I'm wondering if you've considered using more of the unassigned. And also just wondering, because I don't know, if you're required to maintain a certain amount in that unassigned.
So let me start with your first question. So unlike some districts, we carry 2 years of fund balance. So there are districts who only carry 1 year of fund balance. So in December, when they start budgeting, they're trying to figure out how much money they're going to have at the end of June to be able to apply to the following year. We know how much we're applying to this year, and we know how much we'll be able to apply to our budget the following year. In addition, there's some extra dollars in there in the event that we are reduced substantially by the state. And as I said earlier, we receive more than 54% of our subsidy or our funding from the state. So when we reduce when state subsidy is reduced, we either need to do one of two things. We either need to make drastic cuts to our current budget, or we need to find a way of plugging that hole, so to speak. So in the way that we do that is with those carry forward monies. And now I don't remember the remainder of your questions. You want to remind?
Sorry, it was a lengthy question. I was wondering if you're required to maintain a minimal or amount of unassigned fund balance?
The state doesn't have a minimum. However, we can only have 3%, and that 3% we need to have, or the board needs to have a plan for spending those funds over the next 3 years. And our plan for always spending carry forward monies is either to further reduce the allocation to the local taxpayers in a subsequent year, or as we said in this meeting, earlier in this meeting, to create a reserve account for those unexpected expenditures. And I said earlier that we currently have 2 reserve accounts. We have one for special education, and in that account currently is $300,000. And in a capital reserve account, we have $50,000. Those 2 amounts are included in the carryover that you are looking at. It's not kept aside. Does that help, Denise?
Yeah, it does. I just, I know it's nice to keep 2 years worth of fund balance, but we at the city have been directed to go back to look at cuts and reduce the impact to the tax increase. And part of that is going to most likely be using more of our unassigned fund balance. So I just wanted to know if the district had considered it. So thank you.
I think we always consider it every year when as we go through our budget meetings, we always discuss it. And to be honest, I advise against it. I have been here in those years where we have lost $500,000 in subsidy. And when 80% of your budget is salaries and benefits, it's people, you can't cut enough pencils, pens, and erasers to make up $500,000. It's people. And when you have 4 or actually 6 different schools to staff, it makes it very difficult. When there are reductions in students, it's not like there are 10 students from LER or 15 students from Pittston. We may have a reduction in each of our schools. It makes it hard to reduce a grade level teacher, or I guess it would be a grade level teacher or a special ed tech. In addition, it's also one of our other largest expenses is special ed. There are laws regarding what we can and can't do with special ed students. We have a maintenance of effort that we have to maintain every year that says that we are going to apply as much, if not more than what we've spent in previous years for special ed students. And if that goes down, we need to have a reason, and it needs to be a good one. So we are not allowed to just slash special ed, and that is the reasons why I don't recommend to the board using additional carry forward. It puts us in a bad position in the event that we have a huge decrease in subsidy.
Understood. And as a fellow financial advisor, I understand your situation. I also am always hesitant to use that fund balance. I thank you and appreciate your responses, Andrea.
Denise, and I want you to know that while I do not reside in any of the 4 communities, I am very cognizant, or we are very cognizant about the amount that we pass along to our taxpayers. It's a constant discussion through our finance committee meetings. We realize the burden that this places, and as Pat will agree, I think we've done a great job providing the level of education at the amount funded. If we go back to the per pupil slides that we showed earlier, we are below by $2,000 per student the state average. I just think that we are a terrific bargain in MSAD11.
Thank you, Andrea, for that. Colin and Matthew have their hands up.
I just
Matthew,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Colin. Yes, you go ahead.
I just wanted to say something in support and thanks to Andrea and the rest of the administration with the budget that we've arrived at. I just point out something that's not on the articles of expenditure, which is human capital and human expenditure. If you look at it, you think about 80% of that is salaries and benefits, and it's a 2.9% increase. If you went to any teacher, any administrator, any facilities person and asked them, how was your past year? Did you do 2.9% more work? They would laugh you out of the room. This has been a tremendous marathon of a year for everybody involved. Redesigning curriculum, redesigning spaces within the schools, adopting all new procedures, rewriting handbooks from scratch. The amount of effort that the staff and the faculty have put in is beyond belief. And as you remember, they've all been named as essential workers. Outside of the medical industry, I can't think of any group who's been more at risk over this past year from COVID and disease and illness than the folks we've asked to be on the front line. And just to add on top of that, if you know you're a market wonk like me, I'm concerned about inflation creeping up, and I'm sure that's a concern for town managers as well. You know, we're looking for a relatively small increase to support those people, and we're seeing large increases in food, fuel, building materials, insurance. Inflation definitely is something we all have to work as a team on to bring things up proportionately over time. But again, you know, great towns are built around great schools, and I hope that people will see that this is the moment to not leave our educators and our kids behind. This is the moment to dig in a little bit. So again, thank you for the hard work that went into that. And again, the district has really done a great job bringing value at a lower price than some of the surrounding towns. So there you go. That's my stump speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cullen. Matt, Marshall?
Helen, that's tough to follow. This is kind of for Denise. Is what you call the unassigned fund balance, is that another name for the rainy day fund?
I guess that's what a lot of people call it, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Pat Hart has her hand up.
There we go. I want to say thank you to all of you while you're all here on the Google Meet. You know, we all have been in different places, holed up, quarantining, and I know that you all have been in your respective buildings working hard, putting the kids and their families first, whether the kids are in the school or at home. So I know it's been a lot, and I want you all to know that the people like me who are just in our little bubble here for a year do know that, and we do appreciate all that you've done. And I want to thank Andrea and Pat and Becky, perhaps, whoever was involved in this presentation. It's very interesting and helpful to understand. And a deep thanks to the Finance Committee for being forward thinking in using the hopefully the money that we all get to buy down the tax burden for the municipalities, because as you all know, to see a 6% increase is a little hard. I know it says 60 cents, but it is 6%. So buying that down really helps us all a lot. So, so thank you for that. And everybody call Tom Harnett and cheer him on. Thank him for working so hard to restore all this money for all of us.
Thank you. Anne and then Tony.
Sorry, I was being very eloquent too, so I'll start over again. I just want to reiterate what Mayor Hart said. This was very helpful for me to learn the process, and grateful for such great minds looking at all of this. I agree that our kids do come first, and I'm just concerned about the genie that's out of the bottle with all of these offsite video teaching and all of that. And we will be reacting to this for a few more years, unfortunately, because it has I think, given some families' thought on how to continue their children's education. So I wish you well, and thank you for your hard work.
These are conversations and that we're having at the state level and at the local level about how to capture the remote learners, and the main connections, virtual academies, they've done some work, and we can step up, and we're working through the DOE and also locally to see how we can compete in that market. Tony, and then Jim Lothridge.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate being able to sit here with everybody. I'm glad we can get together as our two kind of groups that are representing obviously the students and families and people of this area. Cullen, yeah, I really appreciate what you said. I mean, that was brilliantly put about what the teachers' productivity, concept that this marathon has been, and the the risk that they've and creativity that they've come up with. And really the only thing I just wanted to tag on a little tail end piece here of, so I participated in some of the finance committee meetings. I don't sit on the finance committee, but this time of year I like to tune in. And I always learn something. I always learn something from Andrea, and she's so patient and thoughtful, and from the team as a whole. And I just wanted to sort of reiterate the concept that the idea of the burden to the taxpayer, while we look at what the students need and the teachers need, that concept keeps coming back. And this is an evolved process in my observation of, this one goes forward and this one goes forward and comes back. And there's so much discussion on like Andrea reduces it to those, 10 line items or whatever we're going to be the articles. But there's so much back and forth on each one of those. That I feel we've done our due diligence, certainly, and I appreciate being a part of it. Thank you very much. Oh, and thank you for taking a chance on our Google the Meet platform.
Right. Jim, did you have another something? Okay, your hand is down.
Yes,
and I want to just
go ahead.
Oh, you did. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to, I've been on the finance committee this is my 4th year on the committee. School financing is the most convoluted process I have ever seen. I have looked at financial statements all my adult life, and it is absolutely, I want to say insane, but it works. I don't know how Angela does it, but she does it. And I can assure everybody, having been on the committee, that we do everything we can to reduce the cost to the taxpayer. I mean, we look at that thing, we don't make the decision as whether we buy 10 pencils or 20 pieces of paper. Angela and Pat bring this information to us, they present it, and we really digest it to make sure that we're doing the best we can for all the students and the taxpayers. Nobody wants to spend any more money than is necessary, but we want to spend every penny that is necessary. And when we get done, everyone on the committee and everyone on the board is a taxpayer in this community. So we work really hard to make sure that ourselves and our neighbors don't have to overpay. But we want our kids to come out of here, and they do, with one heck of an education. That's all I want to say, and thank you for having me.
Jim, thank you for that. And I think part of the reason perhaps that school funding is so confounding and restrictive, and it's a line by line, we are allowed to do this, we are not allowed to do that, and it's very legislated and very structured, is because we represent children. We're taking care of children, and children are the voiceless ones. The children, while we all say, I'm Becky Fless and I represent Gardner. No, I'm Becky Fless and I represent the children of MSAD11. And the children of MSAD11 need our voice to have hope for their futures, to live in a way that we have hope for them. And yes, we have to have the conversations about what we can afford and what we cannot afford. But what we get in our bargain is that we have, and one of the things that you said is creating, we don't want to create a superior education that we can't pay for. We're not creating, we are superior because of the staff that we hire, because of the people that have given their time, given their love, given their commitment to our children. That's what largely makes us superior, not that we're spending more money. $1,000 per pupil, less than any of the surrounding districts behind us, around us. We're in the bottom 10 to 15% year after year after year. The superiority in our education system comes from our staff and their commitment to look out for our kids and make sure that they're ready for whatever comes next. And I cannot sing enough praises for our staff. We have some of the most wonderful people. Andrea, who does not live in our district, but she spends our money like she does. She guards it like it's her very own. And we are just so fortunate to have our superintendent, our business manager, every single staff member that we have in the district is outstanding. That's where our superiority lies. So thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight, and we really are appreciative that you came. Pat, I'll turn it back to you.
I'm all set, so I'm done. So if there are no other questions, I would say we sign off for the night.
Well, I saw Nancy Fortier-Brown's hand was up a while ago. I just want to be sure that we didn't miss her.
No, I'm all set.
Great. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I hope that if you have our email addresses. If you have other questions, please send an email to Pat, send one to me, to Veronica as the vice chair, or to Andrea if it's something truly financial. She will answer it much better than any of us can. So I encourage you to do that, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll look forward to that 55%.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much,
Night.
everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thanks. Good night.